In the year I turned 19, I was personally committed to a sanatorium by my nominal brother, Lucien. He gently wiped away my tears, yet his voice was chillingly devoid of any warmth. Mia, your only flaw is that you fall in love with others. Once you've corrected it, brother will take you home. Over 2 years, he employed the most cruel methods to make me forget the boy I once loved. Those exquisitely wrapped gift boxes no longer contained presents, but the boy's body, dismembered inch by inch. I cried and begged for mercy, saying I had already changed, that I loved only him now. But on the anniversary of his death, I still received that meticulously preserved head. Looking into those hollow eyes, I finally laughed, a laugh that came from the depths of my heart. Lucien and I obtained our marriage certificate. On each other's chests, we carved our names with the tip of a knife, letting the scars become eternal marks. In the following 7 years, I ensured his company was staffed entirely by men, and in our home, not even a female mosquito was allowed. Lucien was very satisfied with this, even taking pride in it. Until a girl showed up at our door, claiming to be his biological sister. You imposter who's taken over the nest, how much longer do you plan to monopolize my brother? Looking at the 3 words Lucien sent on my phone, don't hurt her, I smiled. I grabbed a fruit knife and stabbed it into the girl's abdomen, then replied to his message. Brother, have you forgotten? Your sister, your lover, from beginning to end, can only be me alone. In the corridor outside the operating room, the atmosphere was oppressive. Lucien's eyes were bloodshot as he pinned me firmly against the wall. She poses no threat to you at all. Why did you have to harm her? I hadn't seen him look like he wanted to devour me in many years. The last time was 2 years ago, when I nearly died in a rival's trap. I curved my lips into a smile, appearing harmless. Brother, have you forgotten what you said to me when we got our certificate? That day, he held my hand with utmost care, as if I were a treasure he had lost and regained. His eyes were filled with unyielding obsession and deep affection. Mia, whether as sister or lover, I have only you. But now, those hands that once cradled me were clamping down on me fiercely for another sister, his eyes full of rage. A flicker of guilt passed through Lucien's eyes, but it was quickly overtaken by surging anger. I just want to know, when did you become so vicious? It's all thanks to brother's excellent teaching. I smiled even sweeter, revealing a row of white teeth. 7 years ago, in the sanatorium. When that bloody head was presented to me as dinner, my heart had already been forged into the most poisonous steel. What's wrong, brother? Are you dissatisfied with the current me? He flung me away abruptly, his voice as cold as midwinter ice. You'd better pray she's okay, otherwise. Before he could finish, the doctor rushed out of the operating room, sweating profusely. What a relief. The wound deviated slightly, only injuring the spleen without damaging the major arteries. Her life is saved. Lucien's tense body relaxed, and he even managed a smile. She's lucky. I was stunned for a moment, then laughed along. Indeed, a biological sister is different, even heaven favors her a bit more. The girl was soon wheeled out of the operating room, her face pale as paper, looking weak and pitiable. When she saw me, her body trembled uncontrollably, followed by sharp curses. Brother! This lunatic tried to kill me. Call the police and arrest her. I want her to rot in prison. Lucien said nothing, just held her hand with concern and gently soothed her. Prison? I've been there, for a full 2 years. I sauntered over, chuckling lightly. Also, the term brother isn't for just anyone to use. With that, I removed the brooch from my chest and thrust it lightning fast toward her eyes. Lucien seemed prepared, his movements were faster, grabbing my wrist and shoving me back harshly. In the next second, a cold metal object pressed against my forehead. It was the gun he carried. He was thoroughly enraged. I've given you a chance, Mia, don't challenge my bottom line anymore. I was somewhat dazed. He took advantage of my distraction and struck my neck with a hand chop. My vision went black, and I lost consciousness completely. When I awoke again, I found myself confined in the villa's master bedroom. The villa was now surrounded by dozens more bodyguards inside and out, but none dared approach me. Because everyone knew Lucien was a madman with an extreme possessive desire. Except for him, no one could touch a hair on my head. And this precisely gave me an opportunity. I quickly dug a deep pit in the garden, just up to my waist. I jumped in, took a photo, and sent it to him. You have 20 minutes, if I don't see you, I'll bury myself alive. I watched the clock, time ticking by second by second. At 19 minutes, a piercing roar approached from afar. A black sports car crashed directly through the villa's expensive carved iron gate. Lucien jumped out of the driver's seat, his forehead lacerated, blood trickling down his cheek, but he paid it no mind, charging straight toward the location I had sent. The villa's servants and bodyguards all knelt on the ground in fear, trembling. But when he rushed to the garden, he saw only a freshly piled small mound of earth. In front of the pit, there was no one. Lucien's body froze instantly. He let out a beast-like roar. Where is she? His subordinates buried their heads even lower, none daring to make a sound. The pressure around Lucien dropped so low it seemed like water could drip from it. Like a madman, he desperately dug at the soil pit with his bare hands, his expensive tailored suit instantly covered in mud. His fingers were soon ground bloody and raw. Blood gradually seeped into the soil. He paused briefly, then dug even faster and harder. But until he had dug through the entire pit, what he unearthed was only a long stiff dead falcon. It was the pet he had raised for 8 years. Only at this moment did he finally realize he had been tricked by me. The bodyguards knelt uniformly, their voices trembling. Sir, Madame threatened suicide, we truly didn't dare. Before he could finish, Lucien laughed, wiping the mud and blood from his hands. Then calmly, he raised his gun and shot through that bodyguard's knee. Another bodyguard reported shakily, Sir, in the garage, one of your modified motorcycles is missing. Lucien's eyes sharpened, instantly understanding something. He roared in fury, seal off the hospital. I'm going there now. All of this was clearly observed by me from the study window with binoculars. I remembered he had once taught me, when a person is anxious about 2 incompatible matters simultaneously, they lose their prized composure. Just like 7 years ago, when I didn't know whom to love, he drove me to collapse. And like now, for 2 sisters, he has completely lost his reason. I set down the binoculars and sat behind his spacious desk. On the table was our only photo together. I glanced at it once, then expressionlessly turned it face down on the desktop. I opened his study backup computer. It turned out that the girl named Sylvia had been found by him a year ago. There was an encrypted folder on the computer, filled with their photos, each one stinging my eyes. Skiing together in Switzerland, diving in the Maldives, even wearing aprons making pottery. In the photos, Lucien smiled gently and patiently, a side I had never seen. In this year, they had also jointly raised a docile ragdoll cat. If upon first seeing Sylvia, my heart held only disdain and irritation, then at this moment, it was filled solely with overwhelming hatred. Betrayal, my brother had deceived and betrayed me. He had personally molded me into a paranoid madwoman, yet he dared to seek a normal, warm sibling affection? How could that be allowed? I stood up, skillfully climbed out of the study window, my arm scraping a long gash on the rough wall, yet I felt no pain at all. I mounted the motorcycle and sped off. I found the tattoo parlor I had long investigated. As the cold laser burned the skin on my chest to remove the tattoo, I thought, if Lucien knew another man had touched me here, he would probably be furious enough to kill. But this thought flashed by briefly, and I sneered aloud. Perhaps not, after all, this man was his future brother-in-law. When the scar on my chest engraved with his name was completely erased, my phone vibrated. It was a message from him. Nia, stop fooling around, I promise I won't let you 2 meet again. It seemed I had to hurry. I gave the tattoo removal boss, the man named Axel, a seductive smile. My hand climbed onto his shoulder, my gaze sweeping over the cozy pink decorations in his shop. Your girlfriend loves you a lot, right? This shop was all opened by her for you. The boss was stunned for a moment, then grinned greasily, his hand beginning to wander dishonestly on my waist. Love me? In her heart, there's only that perverted brother of hers. Even the shop name SL is the abbreviation of her and her brother's names. Isn't that ridiculous? I smiled even more brilliantly. Then do you know how much the child in Sylvia's belly resembles her perverted brother? He was about to lean down to kiss me when, hearing this, his body stiffened abruptly. How do you know we have a child? Before his words finished, the sharp eyebrow knife in my hand had cleanly pierced his carotid artery. Warm blood splashed on my face. He collapsed limply to the ground, eyes full of terror. I expressionlessly wiped the blood from my face, took a photo, and sent it to Sylvia. Return gift, do you like it? From the day I left the sanatorium, I swore I would never let anyone bully me again. Sylvia's and Lucien's calls came one after another like death summons. I answered none. Instead, I sent Lucien a photo of my bloody chest. Brother, I've said it, you can only have one sister. There was a long silence on the other end before he replied, treat your wound first. I'll send Sylvia away, to any place abroad, you choose. He actually conceded, which made me even angrier. I smashed the phone against the wall. Was he protecting her? On what grounds? At that moment, the inner door was pushed open, and a boy who looked 3 or 4 years old toddled out. He looked at the blood all over the floor and the man lying there, his innocent eyes full of naivety and innocence. I looked at him, smiled, and beckoned him over. 10 minutes later, I rode the motorcycle and vanished into the night. But not far out, I was forced to stop by over a dozen cars and invited before Lucien. He gripped my chin tightly, his voice laced with ice. You can throw tantrums with me however you like, but you shouldn't involve innocent people. You especially shouldn't have killed him. His bloodshot eyes stared fixedly at me. Most importantly, where is the child? I laughed almost maniacally. Shouldn't involve innocent people? 7 years ago, when he chopped up my boyfriend, he didn't say that. I looked up at him, asking word by word, brother, want to make a trade? His gaze became extremely unfamiliar, as if seeing me for the first time. My Nia has truly grown up. Grown so much that I hardly recognize her. I turned my face away, sneering sarcastically at him. Back then, when you held my hand and forced me to poison third uncle, you praised me for learning quickly. How come now that your future brother-in-law is dead, you're heartbroken? Afraid your biological sister will be sad? He pursed his lips tightly, silent. Last time, no more after this. After a long while, he finally spoke, as if making a major decision. Whatever you want, I can give it to you. The condition is that the child must be safe. I smiled brilliantly, like a child who got candy, even lowering my head to kiss the back of his hand gripping mine. I want Sylvia dead. Lucien's face instantly darkened to the point of dripping water. Impossible. He refused categorically. Just then, the room door was slammed open from outside. Sylvia rushed in like a madwoman, crying hysterically, brother. She killed my fiancé. I want her to pay with her life. I want her dead. Her chest heaved violently, the freshly bandaged wound splitting open again, large patches of blood staining through. I smiled even happier. How is it? Are you satisfied with this return gift I sent you? Lucien's icy gaze swept over me once, then he immediately turned to order his subordinates, quick. Call the doctor to treat Miss Sylvia's wound. But in the next second, Sylvia grabbed a pair of surgical scissors from the nearby medical tray and lunged at me desperately. Nia. You bitch. I'll kill you. I stood in place without moving, not even blinking. But Lucien moved. With almost no hesitation, he extended his own arm, blocking forcefully between me and the scissors. The sharp tip of the scissors slashed his forearm, blood gushing out instantly. Brother! Why are you still protecting her like this? Sylvia cried out in collapse. Lucien roared at her. Just a man, dead is dead. Later, brother will find you 100 better ones. Now, finding the child is the most important thing, do you understand? Sylvia finally calmed down. She clumsily bandaged her biological brother while glaring at me with venomous eyes, demanding I hand over the child immediately. Lucien soothingly ruffled her hair, then looked up at me, even raising an eyebrow. In the past, if I got even this minor injury, you would have cried until you couldn't breathe. I was still immersed in the shock of him calling himself brother to Sylvia just now. Hearing this, I merely tugged at the corner of my mouth, revealing a mocking smile. Yes, in the past, every time he was injured, even if just a scrape, the one treating his wound could only be me. Back then, I would cry in heartache, and he would hold me, laughing that I cried more than he hurt. But now, the one bandaging him is his biological sister, Sylvia. He stood up, looking down at me condescendingly, and sighed. All right, my treasure, the game is over. Now, let's talk business. He clapped his hands lightly. From outside, his trusted assistant entered carrying a black urn. I glanced at it once, and my blood seemed to freeze instantly throughout my body. That was my mother's urn. It was my anchor to maintain the last shred of sanity in this mad world. I wanted to rush forward, but my remaining reason told me not to move. The trade begins. Lucien's voice was steady and cruel. You have 10 minutes, tell me where the child is. I looked at him, then at the black urn, and suddenly laughed, laughing until tears welled up. Brother, you're still superior. A few minutes later, the child was safely brought back. Sylvia held him and wailed. Lucien showed a satisfied expression, waving at me to signal the assistant could take the urn away. Just then, Sylvia suddenly screamed and lunged toward the urn. No! I shouted instinctively. Oops! The urn hit the ground with a crash, shattering into pieces. The grayish-white powder scattered instantly, mixing with the dust and blood on the floor, turning into a filthy mud. Time seemed to freeze at that moment. I watched helplessly as the last trace of my mother in this world was trampled, my mind blank. Sylvia covered her mouth, revealing a smug smile. I'm so sorry, I slipped. I want you dead. Looking at the girl protected by the crowd, I stated clearly, word by word. No matter where you flee to the ends of the earth, I'll make sure you die without a whole corpse. Enough. Lucien furrowed his brows tightly, his voice full of warning. Consider this a lesson for what you've done today. With that, he protected the mother and child, leaving the room without looking back. I slowly squatted down, scooping up handfuls of the ashes mixed with filth from the ground. My movements were slow but unusually steady. Back when I was confined in the sanatorium, refusing to yield even unto death, he hadn't touched a speck of my mother's ashes. But now, to vent for his biological sister, he allowed her to trample my only memento like this. My gaze grew colder inch by inch. After everyone left, I dialed a long sealed number, my voice as cold as frost. It's me, initiate the plan. Brother, those who don't keep their word must pay the price. The biting mountain wind lifted my long hair and scattered the last handful of ashes in my hand. I sprinkled them toward the cliff before me. Back then, my mother died here under a hail of bullets from enemies, protecting Lucien and me. From then on, all the collateral branches of the family eyed us covetously. Lucien and I were like two young beasts surviving interdependently in the jungle. Only by backing each other tightly could we carve a path through the bloody storms. I once thought he was my only family in this world. But he personally dragged me into endless hell, turning me into a madman just like him. In these 7 years, I not only learned all his ruthless methods but also quietly reclaimed all the forces my mother left behind. I had thought these things would never be used in this lifetime. The phone screen lit up with a message. It was still a photo from Sylvia. In the photo, Lucien had his sleeves rolled up, his arms still bandaged, yet he was lowering his head, gently brewing soup for her. We are the real family. Sylvia's caption pierced my heart like a needle. Does he cook for you? We not only cook together but also do other things. I replied expressionlessly, then sent a private recording. It was the sounds of Lucien and me entangled in the bedroom late at night, intense and lingering. I called him brother over and over, because he was obsessed with this taboo thrill. I repeatedly shouted, brother, slow down. He panted lowly in my ear, baby, don't you like it intense the most? Brother knows. Almost instantly, Sylvia's call came. I didn't answer, so she sent a series of scream-like curses, bitch. You shameless bitch. How dare you seduce my brother? I could almost imagine her face twisted in jealousy. How ridiculous, she really thought I was just a vicious imposter trying to cling to her brother. Soon, as if trying to convince herself, she sent another message, doesn't matter. Anyway, brother will only accompany me now. He won't return to your cold cage. Just wait to be kicked out. I ignored her further, taking my people and leaving this heartbreaking cliff. In the following month, everything seemed to confirm Sylvia's words. The bodyguards around the villa were completely withdrawn, lifting my confinement entirely. In their place were daily deliveries of dinners from top restaurants and sets of priceless jewelry rarely seen even at auctions. It was as if Lucien was compensating me for these 7 years before driving me away. The outside world began to buzz with rumors that I, the imposter who accompanied Lucien for 7 years, had finally fallen out of favor and was about to be kicked out. Overwhelming news was all about the true heiress Sylvia. Lucien began frequently attending high-end banquets and charity galas with Sylvia. He spent lavishly, bidding on various jade artifacts and antiques for blessings and good fortune for her. He took Sylvia and the child to orphanages for photo ops, to major temples to burn incense and pray. Even because of Sylvia's single "I don't like it," he began gradually divesting the company's gray area businesses. In the news photos, his smile was gentle, his actions carefully protective of Sylvia and the child in her arms. He appeared thoroughly reformed, washing his hands of the past. Watching these news, I almost laughed to tears. A man with hands stained in blood, crawled out from hell. Could kowtowing a few times in temples and taking photos at orphanages wash away his sins? Then live a normal, warm, happy life with his naive, delicate good sister? Impossible. From the moment we carved each other's names into our hearts, our fates were bound. Neither could escape this hell alone. We were destined to entangle in love and hate for lifetimes, until death. A steady footstep sounded behind me. Miss, in 3 days, he will hold a global press conference. According to reliable sources, he plans to formally transfer half of his shares to Sylvia and enter her and the child into the Liu family genealogy. My confidant reported in a low voice, with a hint of concern, "Are we really doing nothing?" My smile gradually turned cold and sharp. I picked up the red wine on the table and drank it in one gulp. Go, of course we go. This is the day I've been waiting for. The press conference site was packed, flashbulbs so bright one couldn't open their eyes. Under the huge screen, the host was emotionally recounting Sylvia's tragic life story that saddens hearers and brings tears to listeners. Lost accidentally in childhood, her birth mother fell ill from longing and died melancholically. Even after her father remarried, he still kept a beautiful princess room for her, hoping day and night for her return. Many sentimental female reporters below had reddened eyes. Lucien sat in the main seat, his face calm, showing no emotion. After the host finished, he raised his hand to signal the assistant that the equity transfer ceremony could formally begin. All reporters' lenses turned with clicks to the venue entrance at the same time. The heavy doors were slowly pushed open. In the next second, everyone present couldn't help but gasp. Because Sylvia appearing at the door was tear-streaked, trembling like a leaf in autumn wind. And I, from behind her, slowly revealed half my body. Also revealing the custom handgun disguised as a pen, steadily pressed against her lower back. The venue exploded instantly, with screams and exclamations rising. Lucien's men reacted quickly, immediately stepping forward to control the chaotic scene. Let her go. Lucien's face was ashen, he stood from his seat and strode toward us. Upon seeing him, Sylvia acted as if seeing a savior, immediately crying out, "Brother! Save me! She's crazy!" I said. I smiled at her, then pulled the trigger without hesitation. He is not your brother. With a soft bang, the bullet precisely pierced her left shoulder. A blood flower bloomed instantly on her white gown. Sylvia let out a pig-slaughtering scream. No. Lucien's pupils contracted sharply, his whole body stiffening in place. The bodyguards behind him immediately raised their guns at me but, wary of the hostage in my hands, none dared to fire rashly. Nia. Lucien growled my name, his voice suppressed with utmost anger and panic. What exactly do you want? As long as you let her go, I'll give you anything. What if I refuse? I sneered, pressing the gun muzzle again against Sylvia's bloody wound. What? Is brother planning to kill me here? Lucien approached me step by step, trying to stall with negotiation. I'll send Sylvia away immediately. What more do you want? Are you forcing me to kill my biological sister just for a vow we once made? Before his words finished, he raised his hand without warning. Another gunshot. But this time, the bullet instantly pierced my right shoulder holding the gun. The huge impact made me fall backward uncontrollably to the ground. The pen gun in my hand flew out and slid far away. His men rushed forward immediately, dragging the incessantly screaming Sylvia away from me. Lucien walked step by step to me, his tall figure completely enveloping me in shadow. He bent down, using his cold large hand to grip my chin tightly, forcing me to meet his gaze. Nia, this time, you've really gone too far. I was pale with pain, yet my lips curved upward, laughing. Once upon a time, if I just accidentally scraped my skin, he would be heartbroken half to death, but now, he could shoot me without hesitation. Brother too, doesn't feel sorry for me at all anymore. I said in a hoarse voice, then, taking advantage of his momentary distraction from my words, used all my strength to kiss his cold lips. Lucien's body shuddered, his pupils dilating instantly, full of astonishment. In that moment of his daze, I pulled off the sharp brooch from my chest. Then, without hesitation, I stabbed it fiercely into his shoulder. Ugh! He grunted, looking down incredulously at the brooch almost fully embedded in his body. Ah! From afar, Sylvia, supported by bodyguards, let out an extremely terrified scream. Lucien looked at me, his expression complex to the extreme, filled with shock, pain, and a trace even he hadn't noticed, excitement. His bodyguards finally reacted, roaring and charging toward me. But in the next second, all the venue's entrances and exits exploded open simultaneously. Countless well-trained men in black surged in from outside, guns raised, surrounding all the Liu family members present. The air froze instantly, crisis imminent. Victory or defeat hung on this gaze between Lucien and me. Seeing the scene before him, Lucien was stunned for half a second, then suddenly burst into laughter. The wound on his shoulder oozed more blood from his shaking body, yet he laughed maniacally as if feeling no pain. My treasure, you always bring me surprises. His voice actually carried a trace of twisted admiration and obsession. Then, his gaze turned icy cold, he raised a hand sharply and snapped his fingers. Instantly, countless infrared dots appeared from high around the venue, precisely locking onto my forehead and heart. Those were the snipers he had ambushed in advance. Brother! Kill her quickly. Kill this lunatic. Sylvia, whose wound had just been simply bandaged, immediately shouted excitedly upon seeing this. Her face had no color, only insane hatred toward me. Yet I smiled, gently shaking my head at Lucien. Brother, you still underestimate me. With that, I mimicked him and snapped my fingers. Almost simultaneously, those infrared dots originally locked on me shifted rapidly, all landing on Lucien. The snipers he brought had evidently been silently controlled by my people long ago. His most trusted confidant assistant was now holding a gun steadily against the back of his head. Lucien widened his eyes, the smile on his face finally freezing. He finally understood everything. My people had thoroughly taken control of the scene. Lucien and Sylvia were firmly held down by my subordinates, kneeling embarrassingly before me. When did it start? Lucien suppressed the turmoil in his heart, asking hoarsely. Turning my people against me. Turning? I looked down at him condescendingly, as if viewing a clown. I merely gave them a better path than following you. He gritted his teeth, veins on his forehead bulging from anger. What exactly do you want? I didn't answer him. Instead, I smiled leisurely at the reporters below, already trembling in fear. Everyone, why stop shooting? Continue, this is a once-in-a-century big news. A few bold ones raised their cameras tremblingly, aiming at us. The huge screen behind me lit up again. In the footage, on the deck of a cruise ship sailing in international waters, the 3-year-old child was suspended in midair by a rope. Below him were surging waves and a group of sharks that smelled blood and hadn't eaten for a long time. No. Lucien's face turned deathly pale instantly. Brother, didn't you just ask what I want? I smiled, propping my chin, answering him leisurely. Biological son or biological sister, choose one. This month, I hadn't been idle. Incidentally, I discovered some unexpected things. My gaze turned to the ashen-faced Lucien, my voice coldly devoid of warmth. You betrayed me long ago, even have a child, cleverly raised under your biological sister's name. We agreed on only me for life, got tired so quickly? Lucien bit his teeth hard, unable to say a word. Sylvia reacted after a long while, then screamed in rebuttal, so what if it's my brother's child? You barren hen. You whore ridden by thousands. Bang. I fired another shot at her without hesitation. This shot went straight for her face. At the critical moment, Lucien suddenly lunged sideways, using his back to block this fatal shot for her. The bullet entered his left shoulder again, mangling flesh and blood. Brother! Sylvia hugged him, then turned her head, crying and cursing me madly. You're a complete lunatic. Why should my brother be tied to you for life? Lucien endured the intense pain, looking up at me with complex and pained eyes. I just wanted a child of my own, is that wrong? If 2 years ago, you could have given birth to our child, why would I seek others? Shut up. I interrupted him sharply. 2 years ago, to shield him from disaster, I was abducted by his enemies for 3 days and nights, escaping by the skin of my teeth. But he, because of those unspeakable rumors and my accidental miscarriage that night, stubbornly concluded I was unclean. I didn't want to recall that heart-piercing past, just took out my phone and started the timer. 60 seconds. Choose, brother. Lucien's eyes were filled with bloodshot veins. Looking at me, he suddenly pulled a nearly deranged smile. Everything in the past was my fault. But my sister and child are innocent, why must you force me to choose? He stared fixedly at my face, as if trying to find even the slightest waver in my expression. Since you're forcing me to choose, it means you still have me in your heart, right? I'll send them all away, let's start over, okay? Nia, let the past be past. He coaxed gently, his tone so soft it could drip water, as if I were just a child throwing an unreasonable tantrum. I laughed lightly. Let the past be past? I had given him chances. Long before Sylvia showed up, I had noticed something off about him. He came home later and later, occasionally carrying unfamiliar women's perfume scents. But each time, he just held me, repeating in my ear that he would forever have only me by his side. I believed him, but he deceived me. I bent down, close to Lucien's ear, my voice cold like poison-quenched ice. Back then, when I knelt on the ground begging you to spare that boy, crying that we had broken up long ago, why didn't you say let it pass? When I was abducted by enemies for you, returning battered and bruised, and you suspected me of being unclean, why didn't you say let it pass? Now, when it's your turn to choose between biological sister and son, you think of saying it's past? I pointed to the ticking countdown on the phone screen. 30 seconds left. Sylvia finally realized I wasn't joking. She screamed in terror, brother. I was just found by you. I was lost for over 20 years. You can't abandon me. Brother. She's a lunatic. Don't be fooled by her. Let's go. Let's leave here together, fly far away, okay? Lucien stared fixedly at me, his eyes densely bloodshot, his lip bitten bloody by himself. He suddenly broke free from the subordinates holding him behind, and with a thud, knelt heavily before me. I was wrong. Nia. It's all my fault. Spare them. I'll die. Trade my life for theirs. I was stunned for a moment. We had crawled through mud together, fought wild dogs for food, been cornered by dozens of enemies. Even with a knife to his throat, he never said I'll die. But now, for these two, he willingly knelt and begged for death before me. 10 seconds. I announced coldly. My subordinates beside me immediately understood, roughly pulling the still crying Sylvia aside, pressing the cold muzzle to her temple. 5 seconds. Lucien went completely mad, no longer his usual composed self, roaring like a beast cornered in desperation. No. If you choose neither, then they both die. I reminded him calmly, then continued counting. 3, 2. Just as I was about to say 1, he finally roared in collapse, "Son. I want my son." I smiled. Bang. A gunshot, Sylvia fell accordingly. Lucien slumped to the ground, a desperate tear sliding from his eye corner. On the big screen, the child was safely taken back to the cabin. I smoothed the stray hair by my ear, my voice soft like a devil's murmur. "Brother, look, now you have only me as your sister." Lucien collapsed on the ground. After a long time, he slowly raised his head to look at me. His gaze was like truly seeing me for the first time. He broke down crying, "Vicious. Nia, you're truly too vicious. How did you become like this today? Have you forgotten all the days we endured together? Why force me like this? I hate you." He panted heavily, stating word by word. I slowly stood up, walking to him. "Brother, I'm just returning exactly what you once did to me. Why can I love you, yet you hate me?" He gazed blankly at the floor, murmuring, "Love me? When has your heart truly loved me?" Lucien stated word by word. "You don't love me at all. You went mad 7 years ago. It was relying on my love for you that I raised you to be like this today. You're no longer my Nia, you're a complete lunatic. A heartless walking corpse." I burst into laughter, the sound echoing in the dead silent venue, exceptionally harsh. "Not right, brother. I've clearly become as you wished, loving you deeply, uniquely, and scrupulously. It's you who doesn't love me anymore." He shook his head forcefully, tears mixing with blood on his face sliding down. "I love the old Nia. The soft-hearted, kind Nia who would cry for a stray cat. Not the current you. You're not her, you're just a monster occupying her body." "Oh?" I raised an eyebrow. "So that's why, after getting me, you grew more and more weary of me. Then secretly sought your biological sister, hoping to find a trace of the old Nia in her?" Lucien seemed struck in his deepest secret. His body trembled sharply, then he laughed as if giving up. "Yes. So what? I was looking for her shadow. But I never thought of letting her replace Nia. Nia is forever unique in my heart. Sylvia is just a substitute. Dead is dead, so what?" He laughed maniacally and desolately, but tears rolled uncontrollably from his eyes. I stopped laughing, quietly looking behind him, asking softly, "Sylvia, did you hear? Your brother who professed to accompany you for life. He says you're just my substitute." Lucien's laughter stopped abruptly. His whole body stiffened in place, as if instantly frozen, pupils contracting violently. He turned his head extremely slowly, incredulously. Sylvia, whose mouth had just been released by my subordinates, was slumped there, face deathly pale. She wasn't dead. I had only had her leg shot. At this moment, her eyes stared fixedly at Lucien. Those eyes once full of dependence and admiration now held only endless shock, betrayal, and despair. Sylvia seemed drained of all strength, tears mixed with snot flowing messily over her face. "So I'm the substitute?" Her voice trembled, carrying an incredulous absurdity. But you and I are blood-related, brother. We are the real family." Her despairing crying appearance actually resembled me a bit when Lucien drove me to desperation back then. Perhaps this appearance made Lucien feel like back then. His gaze blanked for a moment, subconsciously explaining, "No, it's not like that, Sylvia, listen to me explain." "Then what is it?" Sylvia interrupted him sharply, breaking down in sobs. "Weren't you preparing to transfer half your shares to me? Didn't you tell me personally you'd make me and the child happy and worry-free for life? Watching Lucien's unprecedentedly disheveled appearance, I felt pulled back to 7 years ago. Only then, the one crying and begging was me. And he showed no compassion. Just gently yet cruelly wiping my tears, brainwashing me word by word, brother doesn't like that guy because he can't give you happiness. In this world, only brother has this ability and will give you the best. You just need to obediently look at brother, depend on brother. Back then, I, like Sylvia now, foolishly believed this gift called love. However, Sylvia was luckier than me. She saw through the truth under this sweet trap in just 1 year. I raised my hand to wipe the tears from laughing, then leisurely said, "Fool. The shares he prepared to transfer to you are all debt-ridden shell companies. Once you sign, you'll rightfully shoulder billions in debt. Then, you'll be completely in his grasp, unable to escape." I revealed another cruel truth to her on my own. "You're talking nonsense." "Nia, shut up." Lucien reacted sharply, roaring harshly to interrupt me. But it was too late. Every word of mine smashed clearly into Sylvia's ears. She let out a series of laughs more wretched than cries. "I hate you, brother." Her voice was so light it was almost inaudible, yet it made Lucien's pupils contract sharply. In the next second, Sylvia snatched the handgun from the nearby bodyguard's waist, aiming at her own temple. "No." Bang! She fell heavily to the cold ground. This time, she didn't get up again. Lucien let out a heart-rending wail, as if his heart was ripped out raw, then stomped underfoot and crushed. I laughed, gloating, "Brother, look, you've personally killed your sister again." Lucien's wails gradually stopped. He slowly raised his head, his eyes terrifyingly bloodshot, staring fixedly at me. "You did it on purpose." His voice was extremely hoarse, each word squeezed from his throat. "You deliberately recreated the scene from 7 years ago. You want me to experience your pain back then, right?" He suddenly propped up his battered body, ignoring the bleeding wounds on his shoulders, half crawling toward me. I waved my hand, signaling my people not to stop him. "Why?" he roared in question, as if truly puzzled. "Since you had the ability to escape me long ago, why stay by my side? Why wait until now to retaliate this way? Why?" I also leaned slightly, approaching him. In his violently contracting pupils, I clearly saw my current reflection. Pale face, terrifyingly calm eyes. I spoke softly, "Because I loved you, brother." He trembled sharply, as if scalded by my words. "If only hate." I continued, my gaze seeming to pierce through him, seeing those past soaked in blood and tears. How could I have lived to today, becoming what I am now? At 8 years old, when I followed Mom to the Liu family, this man-eating place without spitting bones, it was you, brother, who always protected me. After Mom left, you were my most important person, my only family. So. I paused, my tone indistinguishable between sarcasm or sorrow. Even if you killed the one I loved, locked me up, drove me mad, I couldn't purely hate you. But now, you and I have long become the same kind of people, the same madmen. I raised my other intact hand, gently stroking his cheek. My action was tender, but my voice bone-chillingly cold. Between us, we can only torment each other like this, entangle each other. For lifetimes, neither can hope for release. Lucien stared fixedly at me. Seconds later, he began laughing maniacally, tears flowing, uglier than crying. Good. Good for lifetimes. Good for entangling each other. Before the laughter ended, his gaze turned ruthless suddenly, erupting his last strength, pouncing me to the ground. In a flash, he pulled off the brooch from my chest, using all his might, stabbing straight toward my heart. "Then let's go to hell together," he roared, face ferocious. I looked at his resolute and mad eyes, without struggling, even slowly closing my eyes. However, the anticipated intense pain didn't come. Bang! An extremely soft gunshot. Not from anyone around. The bullet fired from very close, precisely entering Lucien's chest. His action froze instantly. He looked down incredulously at the bleeding wound on his right chest. Then slowly raised his eyes to the pen gun he had personally given me for self-defense, which I had thrown not far away. He seemed to want to say something, lips moving, but no sound came. Yet, relying on our years of tacit understanding, I clearly read his lip language. He was calling my name. Nia. Finally, warm blood drops fell on my face. His heavy body slowly collapsed toward me. The whole scene was dead silent. I lay on the cold floor, not pushing him away. Just with eyes open, expressionlessly gazing at the glaring crystal chandelier on the ceiling. Feeling his body temperature fade bit by bit in my arms. Hell? We were long in it. Lucien's that confidant assistant, now my confidant, was the first to react. He came forward to help me up. "Miss, how to handle here?" he asked lowly, his gaze sweeping over the reporters below, already scared silent as cicadas in winter. My cold gaze slowly swept over every terrified face below. Then, I revealed an extremely gentle smile. "Everyone." My voice was clear and steady, yet carrying an unquestionable pressure. "All that happened today, treat it as watching a spectacular movie." I paused, smile deepening, eyes cold as frost. "Then, please let it rot forever in your stomachs." The crowd below nodded vigorously like pecking chicks, not daring to breathe loudly. I turned, leaving this place without looking back. Also leaving the home where Lucien and I entangled for a full 10 years. After my wounds healed, I formally took over all the Lu family businesses. I used 3 years, following his unfinished plans from life, to gradually cleanse the company from those gray areas, transforming it into legitimate enterprises. The people Lucien left were very useful. But I would no longer entrust even a shred of true heart to anyone. Especially that confidant assistant who chose me earliest and followed Lucien the longest. I knew him as long as Lucien did. If I trusted anyone most, perhaps it was him. In these 3 years, he never had the slightest error. Even more efficient and reliable than when Lucien was alive. Sometimes I wondered why he unhesitatingly chose to betray Lucien and stand with me. Finally, on a late night after handling all affairs, I called him back and asked. He stood at the office door, back to me, voice still steady, "Miss, no other reason. Under him, I would forever be just an assistant." He paused, adding, "But I believe you will give me everything I want." I smiled, not pursuing further. All matters were handled. The child Lucien left. I used most of my assets to set up a trust fund for him, ensuring he could live affluently and carefree in the future. Perhaps this counts as compensation to him. Seasons came and went, another few years passed. On an afternoon with unbelievably good sunshine, I left here silently. To a very distant small island. A place far from where my brother and I entangled for years. I heard the sea there is the bluest, the sunshine the warmest. I heard it's the place in this world closest to heaven.